Recording is on.
You muted.
Good morning, everybody. It's October 31st. And yeah, it's Sunday. COP starts tomorrow, Halloween tonight. And not a lot of people are on this call, just Sophie and me. But yeah, we decided we wanted to have a little, well, I decided I want to have a little rant about geoengineering again. And I posted this video with David Keith. I think he is a psychopathic criminal. And yeah, I think he should be put on the set with Alec Baldwin, as far as I can tell. Sophie, what is your take on that video? You watched it.
Yes, I watched it too. Yeah, I think you are right, because I think that geoengineering is going to be imposed all of a sudden on us without information, without any choice given to anyone, without discussion. I think it's going to be, as you said before, imposed because of fear and that people are going to use it as a last resort. I think we need to talk about it. We need to spread the information about it and expose the crazy guys who are behind this. So I know you have a lot to say about this. I leave you to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should, you know, the right thing to do is to take extreme action to shut the conversation down. It would be very easy to take drastic actions to make sure that nobody went on this path, basically shock actions. And I think somebody should do it soon. But you see, the danger is that these guys will talk everybody into it. So, you know, this is what I was kind of thinking of doing a response video to that one, but he's a very slimy, slippery character, obviously a psychopath. You can see many times when he starts his megalomania slips. So he's very cool and calculated, and he's got this rational, you know, PhD, I'm the sanest person in the room, you know, kind of persona, and he'll fool a lot of people. He is an out-and-out psychopath. You can see it in every, you know, when his mask drops. Like, he says things which are, he's not self-aware enough. He's self-aware enough to come off, to fool, you know, 50% of the audience. But he's not self-aware enough that he doesn't see his mask drop. So, for example, he said something, to give you an idea of the megalomania of this freak, is he said, you know, in the question time in that video, he was saying, well, you know, we have to think in terms of, you know, what kind of thermostat lever we give, you know, the control that we give to politicians. You know, if they're all crazy, you know, then we have to make sure that it's, you know, really dampened down so that it's the response on the knob is really low, because, you know, you don't want crazy people in a bar fight to be fiddling with the knob. But then if they're really rational and, you know, sane people, then you might, you know, they're really wise, then you might want to give a big response on the lever. And so, like, I cannot tell you how crazy this talk is. For starters, imagine the megalomania of this character. He as a lunatic fringe scientist, think that the scientists get to set the lever and the parameters of the knob, and that, you know, then they hand it over to the politicians. It's like, it's so insane. You just don't know where to start. It's like as if the politicians are all one block, if the United Nations or anything. It's like, you know, there's no one thermostat for everybody to fight over. Anybody can do geoengineering. Pakistan can do it tomorrow. India can do it tomorrow. And by progressing the science, he thinks well, we're all going to come to a consensus about whether we should do it or not. And it's like, no. Where does that lunatic assumption come from? You could do all the science, and India could come to the conclusion, well, it's very, very well, it's very apropos for India. And America and Europe could say, this is insanity. It's like, it's so barking mad to go down this road, it beggars belief. But you see, what he's doing is he's perfecting. He's been at this for so long. He's perfecting the arguments, so they become very slick, polished. And so, at first people just freak out and go, "This guy's crazy. I'm not gonna play with the planet. Are you nuts?" And then the shock value wears off, and you can see what he's doing. Him and Bill Gates and Bill and Melinda Gates, they want to. At the moment, it's a very incestuous conversation. There are really 20 people that are really driving all the papers that are written on it. They're just a crazy bunch, but they're backed by billionaires. So he's saying, well, we need to widen the conversation, which sounds plausible and nice. But what he's saying is we need to habituate the public to this conversation. So when we've talked it out enough, and I've given all these rational arguments, and then I've got all these stupid people on board, and then they'll start exactly like, what we saw about bright green lights. It's the same deal. It's like, over time, people will get to think that it's sane, because enough sane people will be there talking in this rational, smooth, slimy, snake-like voice that always fools everybody. So Dr. Strangelove will sweet talk the public into doing this insanity. And it all by these pseudo-rational arguments that are so short-sighted. It's hard, it's one of these things that is so wrong and so stupid. It's hard to get a handle on it. It's one of these things, like it's one of these big lies where it's like, it's so dumb, it's not even wrong, that kind of thing. And so that makes it extremely dangerous to even get into the discussion, let alone to propagate the science. So, okay, let me show you, for an example, why this is so idiotic and why these people are so fucking dangerous, these psychopaths. It's like, okay, he responded to one thing in the video that I mentioned before, and that's about, funnily enough, he came up with exactly the same analogy I did, which was pilot-induced oscillation, right? And so I was explaining to you about helicopters and how, your overcorrection and stuff happens. And he kind of acknowledged that that is an issue. He just doesn't realize how much of an issue it is. So just one thing on that pilot-induced oscillation. When the first time I ever I've seen a 747 crash with that pilot-induced oscillation when I was about a 9-year-old. Luckily, it was in a simulator. But my cousin is an airline pilot, or retired now, but for South African Airways. And when I was about 9 years old, he took me in a simulator. In those days, it wasn't electronic. It had a big model with a camera that ran along. So this huge model world, and then this camera ran along. You can see little houses and trees. Very, very cool. But one of the pilots, they set the minima so that he broke cloud and he was on the wrong side of the runway. This is a 747 simulator. He's a senior pilot, and he banked hard to try and get the plane back on track. And when he tried to level the wings again, he overcorrected, and he got into this oscillation. We overcorrected this way, then he overcorrected that way, and the whole thing piled into the ground. This is an actual realistic simulation with a qualified senior captain that was going to go and fly real 747s the next day, and I saw him crash this thing. And I got such a vivid picture about overcorrecting. And then I've since seen control boats and planes and stuff, and so here's the number of things that are wrong in David Key's thinking. So he's saying he addressed, okay, let's just go through this control thing. And so he's saying, well, no, it is controllable because of feedback. No, it's uncontrollable because of feedback. So this is how a control system works. So it's basically the same. What he's proposing is the same as any cybernetic control system that the cyberneticists were talking about, Norbert Wiener and all of those guys, McCulloch and Shannon, and they're all talking about feedback and control systems. And so particularly for gun, World War II anti-aircraft guns and stuff like that. So it's all about radar and tracking and the having the gun traverse and things like that. So it's so what these systems are is pretty much like a standard autopilot on a yacht like this one. So what they happen is that you set up the course you want to steer, like 300, and then they have two parameters that you can tweak. One's called the gain and one's called the response. So the gain is what he was talking about was, how much the thermostat reacts when you turn. So it's, in other words, when the course drifts off and you start getting a deviation, the gain says, well, when do I start correcting? When it's like 305 degrees, or whether it's 310 degrees, or when it's 295 degrees, or it's like, when do I start responding? And then the second parameter is the response, and that's how much do I turn the rudder when I respond. So now think of it, if you set it wrong, you'll see something like this. You'll see it start to hunt. And so it will go, say, left a little bit, then you've set the gain too much. If you set the gain and the response too much, it'll say, for example, start going to the right. You'll start seeing it go to starboard. Then it will realize it's off course, and then it would kick hard on the rudder. And then it would come rapidly swinging, and the swing would pass through your heading, 300, your proposed heading, and then it would pick up somewhere around 296. And then it would pick up, oh, it's on the port side, and then it would swing again too aggressively over. And each time, the swing's getting bigger and bigger until basically you will eventually start getting a chaotic result. Now, he realizes that's the danger, but it needs emphasis on how stupid he is. Because to get that measurement is extremely difficult. Okay, for one thing is he says something. I must just take a deviation there about the chaos. He got the other thing that I said, which what I was saying on these things. It's almost like he listens to them. It's like about chaos. So obviously people have told him, no, it's a chaotic system. You can't control it. Here's the biggest fuck up he made in the whole video. And this is where he's completely out of his depth and why he needs to be euthanized, basically. He needs to be shut the fuck up because this is dangerous talk. He's saying, no, just because it's chaotic does not mean we can't control it. Yes, it fucking does, you moron, you PhD fuckhead. He's saying, no, and he gives a little, that's, if you know anything about that plane that he flashed up, it was made to be dynamically unstable. It's a fighter plane prototype, and it was from some X program, and it was so that planes can be more maneuverable. If you make them stable, then you have to overcome the inertia, and then that's more the safety thing, and that's kind of what the response overcorrection is all about. Now, if you make them dynamically unstable, it means they're ready to tumble out of the air at any moment. So then they respond very, very quickly to control inputs because they're dynamically unstable. Here's the thing that he's missing. That plane, right, is in sort of a chaotic regime, but it's controlled by a computer. If that computer goes off for a second, that plane will tumble out of the sky. The pilot has to eject. That computer is making control corrections on the millisecond boundary. It's making thousands and thousands of corrections every single second just to keep the plane in the air and flying. Now think about that. He is comparing the climate, where you get one chance to experiment with, right? And he's comparing it to this plane. This plane was developed over decades, and they can control the chaos because with thousands and thousands of experiments, they found the envelope of the chaos, of where the chaos was contained. Then they could get the computer to actually do all these course corrections. It took a very long time and thousands of errors. With the planet Earth, you only get one fucking chance. So it's a completely false analogy. In fact, it's an analogy to prove that you shouldn't be doing this. Because the very fact that they had to explore the boundary of chaos for that plane means that you will not be able to do that with the Earth. Therefore, you should not be fucking around with it. So this idea that, oh, we can contain the chaos is absolute bullshit. He's thinking, well, you can start slowly. You can ramp up very cautiously, tickle the tail of the dragon. And then, you know, if something goes wrong, we can like pull back. Say, no, you're being a complete moron. Think about it. Yeah, it's just so bad. It's hard to know where to even start. It's so stupid. Okay, look, the temperature is changing all the time, right? So it's changing between the day and the nighttime temperature. It's changing with the seasons. So if you're looking at the global average temperature, right? And you're saying like, exactly where do you set the response? Do you set the response to the daily temperature? Obviously not. Obviously you would take a moving average. So then from how long? You take a moving average back to the industrial revolution? Of course not, because then it would be too dampened down. So where's the sweet spot where it's just enough, you know, running average from the, you know, that evens out the yearly temperature cycle, the seasonal cycles, the daily cycles, and it's smooth enough, and then you can actually read and respond to it. Is it a year? Is it 18 months? Is it 2 years? You're just fucking guessing. No one knows. And you cannot be sure enough with a climate model to say, oh, the correct moving average to basically be the meter that we work on. So that's, you know, how we interrogate the system and how we measure exactly what our response is you cannot do that with models. The models are not designed to do that kind of thing. It doesn't matter if you put 4 parameters in. There are literally billions of parameters in the climate system. So you would be a moron if you even attempted this. But think about what he's going to do. If he was allowed to do this insanity, he's thinking, oh, you know, it's like Mount Pinatubo. We've seen Mount Pinatubo. It blew up. And then, you know, nature's done a lot worse with Earth and stuff. So we would just be, you know, tickling the tail of the dragon. We'd start small. We'd start putting some sulfates up in the atmosphere and carry on and, you know, increase and increase and increase slowly. What could go wrong? Well, I'll tell you what could go wrong. For starters, Mount Pinatubo could go up again. Then you could see something, you know, maybe temperatures would plummet. And then you'd say, well, is it Mount Pinatubo or is it you? Was it all the accumulation of the stuff you did? You've got 2 weeks to stop, right? So then what happened? So here's the thing, is he's thinking way too linearly. He doesn't understand chaos. Now, something that's relevant to his fucked up thinking is the wind scale. So I posted that video about wind scale. By the way, just as an aside, is you've got your climate action. Bojo's about to announce that Britain's going full on nuclear. That's going to be its primary climate action. So great work, activists. You just fucked up you've just set yourself up for Fukushima, because, you know, nuclear plants get shut down when the temperature goes up. If they get cut off from the grid, they go Fukushima. So brilliant job. Well done. All those years of climate activism have turned into your great wet dream. So anyway, that aside, if you look at that video about what happened at Windscale, that is an example of self-organized criticality. So this is very much the type of thing that happens. I know this from making a glass furnace, a microwave glass furnace. So what they're seeing in that that pile that they have at wind scale. Right, they have a big graphic pile, and then what they found was you've got a hotspot in the carbon. Right, the carbon is the inhibitor of the nuclear reaction. Right? But when it gets, you see what's happening in it, and they must have known it, is it's starting to run away. When you see that run away, they should have shut down Windscale, right? Because it is chaotic. They are with certainty going to get into that accident that happened. You see, what they did was they controlled it with a very bad practice. It's kind of analogous to solar radiation management. Is if you get a hotspot, what's happening is you're getting thermal runaway in a spot. You're getting feedback in that tiny spot. So the more it runs away, the more it becomes an absorber, and the more it absorbs, the more heat it generates, and so you get the picture. It's a feedback loop. Now, to break that feedback loop, what they did was they counterintuitively, you might think, they brought the entire reactor pile, they brought the temperature up high, higher than the hotspot. So that then it's no longer running away just in that area, it's making a much bigger domain where it's heated. Then when you bring the whole thing back down again, everything anneals properly. It's kind of like an Ising spin model where everything has a domain where it's starting to spin in that hotspot. And then you say like, okay, I'll scramble everything up again, bring the temperature down, now it's more homogeneous. And you kind of ring it a little. What you're doing is critically dangerous. Because if you, exactly what happened is that they started to find that when they brought it down, there were lots of hotspots. So then the whole thing ran away in many areas and caught fire. That's what happened at Windscale. Now you have to imagine doing exactly the same kind of thing on a planet-wide scale. So here, David Keith is thinking like a linear thinking lunatic mad scientist with all these rabid mad dog assumptions, like, for example, that the Earth will heat up uniformly. So one part of his head knows that it won't heat up uniformly because they did tests on that. The other part of his head doesn't understand the self-organized criticality and runaway and feedback systems. So that he hasn't put the two together. Because think of this, you might start raising, putting sulfates in the stratosphere. You start cooling the planet, right? But some area might cool or heat much faster. It might get into a feedback loop. So, let's take the Arctic, for example. You might start off going like, oh, this is great. Look at the freeze in the winter this year. It's fucking awesome. That's the first year. The second year, it's like, oh, shit. The freeze now comes down to Scotland. Oops, better fuck up. We fucked up. Now we'll stop putting up the phosphates because we've obviously overcooked things a little bit. The AMOC's probably going to stop overturning or something like that. There are going to be lots of repercussions. Bad news, guys. Let's take a year off and see what the ice in the Arctic does. Then what you might find after that is it doesn't come back. Then somebody would say, exactly like a physicist did at Windscale, say, well, try heating up the whole thing. So in other words, they say, well, let's try cooling the planet down all over and start up. So, we'll heat the planet up again and then cool it back down again and do this kind of the same thing that they did at Windscale. What happens then if you do that, you're also in that regime where you might find that when it comes back, it's worse. You see, there's hysteresis in the system. You can't get the Earth system, take it up, take up the CO2 and all the greenhouse gases, then put aerosol in the stratosphere. So say you start off at like, say, 1 degree, so 1.1 degree or something like over the baseline of the Industrial Revolution, right? So then it's saying, you start off there. You start doing your cooling and you think, well, bring it down, 1 degree, right? So he's thinking that, well, actually, no, he does know this, but if you bring it back down 1 degree, you're not getting in a time machine and going back to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, because it's not the atmosphere of the Industrial Revolution. It's filled with greenhouse gases to 420 parts per million CO2, plus this masking effect from the sulfates that you're putting up there. So although the temperature is back to 1.1, it's not the same atmosphere. So you can see, now he says, oh, well, we ran the models and then, it's actually kind of safe. He does these vector diagrams. Just the fact that he's thinking that way means he should be put in a straitjacket. Because you don't know the regime. Those climate models things are computer models. They're toy models. They wind up toys. They just, basically, you can do better with a pen and paper. And so he's thinking that you're in a safe regime when you park the planet at 430 parts per million. Okay, that's the first idiotic thing, is not thinking in terms of what this regime will be in. The models were not created for 420 parts per million plus sulfates in the atmosphere. They're not designed to model that. To say that it's safe because you've chucked in those parameters and look fine is idiotic. So, insane, in fact. And so okay, that's the first thing. But he's assuming all the stasis and smoothness and stuff. He's assuming that when you bring the planet down back to 1 degree Celsius again, that, that you've got complete control. You've got all the countries online. Everybody's doing this together. And of course you're not going to get it that way. Of some guy like William Nordhaus or something is going to be writing papers saying, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing all this carbon reduction? We've proved that we can control the temperature of the planet. We need to belch out carbon as much as we want. And then he'll get a Nobel Prize for saying the sweet spot for economic growth is here. When with, say 5% dimming, solar dimming, is the sweet spot for crop production, for GDP growth. Sure, there's, South America and India gets kicked in the nuts and becomes a desert. But if you look at the economics, we can pay India to offset the damage that we do. So the guy's going to get a Nobel Prize for saying that shit. So then some guy like David Keith, who thinks he's going to be the tsar of, solar radiation management of the globe, he's going to be saying like, no, guys, you can't do that. Because they're like, well, come on, your science, you did the science. You just said that it works, doesn't it? And then he's going to be saying, no, you're fucking up my program. I need to measure all this stuff. All your extra we did the modeling with this CO2, at 420 parts per million. You're taking it up to 450 parts per million and 5% solar radiation dimming. So he said, we didn't work that out. You see, he's so naive to assume that he has this ultimate control, that everything, politically aligned, that people won't be flying over the thermostat, but that he gets to create the thermostat. No, he gets to put all the papers out there, and then you have a social tipping point that's, everybody's now okay with geoengineering, or someone like Xi Jinping, or all these psychopaths that are now totalitarians. They have absolute control. They can go and do it on their own. They don't need David Keith anymore. So he's a megalomaniac. Fuck it.
May I ask a question on that? What you're saying there, because at the beginning of the video, you can hear him contradicting himself, like saying that environmental awareness and geoengineering are maybe antagonistic, but then he says, I don't think climate change is a threat to humanity. Or then he says, I think the biggest threat to humanity are the humans. And then he carries on with what you're describing and his plans. So I was wondering what is going to be, most people don't understand the physics of what you're talking about. It's a bit difficult for a lot of people who don't have an engineer leaning mind, or even, understanding what is chaos and complex systems. So the reception of in the public of exposés as David Keith does is going to be probably quite good in the light of what COP is going to probably unveil now. And so what do we do to destroy the message of David Keith?
quick and simple propaganda of the deed. You see, the reason is this is how it's likely to unfold. Is he's normalizing and habituating people to this idea, so that at first is very, very resistant. Everybody's instinctively resistant. The more then he normalized this craziness, then the more people will be primed to reach for it as a desperate measure. So they're selling it as, look, guys, this is not plan A. This is just having insurance in our back pocket. What they know is that at some point in this catastrophe, people are going to reach for the gun. That insurance policy is going to be used. He knows that very well. All he's doing is priming people like a snake. He's putting this idea out there, getting people used to it. This is Bill Gates talking through him, right? So Bill Gates is the Elon Musk and all these other nuts. They're going to go to Mars. Well, Mars is, they're not going to terraform Mars. No, Mars is not planet B. Mars is not the insurance policy for us fucking up this planet. Those guys are mega insane and barking mad. But Bill Gates is a little bit smarter than them. And he's like, okay, you guys, you go and do your jerk off, race on the moon and stuff to go to Mars. And so literally they want to race cars. Tesla's on the moon. Oh God, just fuck. Oh boy. And everybody's loving it, by the way. That Elon Musk now is the richest man of all time. He's the first person to get over $300 billion. And it's nothing. There's nothing there. It's just a con man. But the world is loving it because he's like this tech messiah. But Bill Gates is a little bit smarter than him. And Bill Gates' plan is like, terraforming Mars is too difficult, Populating Mars and terraforming is too difficult. I've got a better idea. I'll populate and terraform a planet closer to home, the blue one. So Bill Gates is thinking he's going to depopulate the Earth and terraform it. And these guys like David Keith are his mouthpiece. So he's playing chess. They're all playing chess with the planet. And so the public, the game they're playing, the public, I do not have any confidence in the public being able to see through it. The public's just too dumb. So you have to do shock value to make it taboo, right? You need to, you see, if somebody did, you can tell what I'm talking about. If they did that, it would put a chill on it. Nobody would go there again, right? Everybody would say, oh, this is terrible, and we mustn't let this affect science, and we mustn't let, terror override rational thinking, and so the science must go on. And they'd all say that, and then you'd find no one would do it. They're all cowards, basically, right? See, David Keith he keeps on saying, we mustn't have patents for this technology. They must be owned by the world. And then he mentions on the video, oh, well, I don't talk about my day job because it's a conflict of interest. And it's like, you snake. He on record of saying, there's going to be tons and tons of money to be paid by whoever owns the technology for geoengineering. So he thinks he's going to be Tsar of the world, and he's going to be making out like a billionaire. There's a complete conflict of interest in what he's doing. So they're all playing chess with the world, and the public is, with psychopaths, they're too dumb. Psychopaths, as I mentioned, they will divide the room, and so this will divide the planet. They're just working their way in, so the COP26, will fall right in their lap because they're going to try and hijack the conversation. Everybody's going to be doing the same old shit, which is like make all these stupid promises that even if they, were not empty promises, they wouldn't achieve the goals required anyway for climate mitigation. So, but riding on the back of that, activists think, oh, well then, the revolution is going to start. No, it isn't. It's not a big enough shock to start the revolution. And then people like David Keith are thinking, well, this is going to be our open door to say, like, we have to change the conversation now. And the following wind, you'll get the benefit of COP26 because people will be more and more interested in an insurance policy. And so, yeah, it's the most saleable thing in the world because it's sold as rational, intelligent, and like, who wouldn't want a safety policy? And it's like, well, the analogy is an alcoholic. Is you don't want an alcoholic to have the moral hazard of saying, well, I've got the best healthcare. You say, like, we need to make sure that this alcoholic has gold-plated healthcare and has access to the best healthcare money can provide. That's not a good thing to do to an alcoholic. Then he says, like, I can double my drinking now, because he has the moral hazard of thinking, like, well, I've got a safety net. I might as well go and do a more extreme high wire act. And so, but yeah, I mean, that's where they're deliberately steering it, is that they will steer us down this. They know that the politicians are going to steer us down the path of catastrophe because they're pursuing GDP growth, and then they're thinking, then we'll step forward with our grand chess move, and that is, we have the solution at a price, and then these guys will be, in there as the Tsar and controller of the climate. And it's like, these guys, you see, they need the same treatment that James Bond gave them in every movie. That is the only treatment, because they will lull the Pied Pipers that will just lead the public on. The public's not smart enough to see through this game. That's what makes it so damn dangerous. Even PhDs and people that are should know better can't see through it. But you can appeal to the public through, because throughout history there have been all these warnings about Icarus flying too close to the sun, and the in Yiddish mythology about the golem and stuff like that. So you can appeal to people that there's so many stories about the hubris, like even Graham Hancock talking about the hubris of all these people in Atlantis. And so you can, but you see, that's a kind of a memory in the background. That's kind of a reminder saying, remember you are but a man. Remember you are but a man. You see, you know what that's from? When somebody got awarded a triumph in ancient Rome. So if you saved Rome, you got awarded a triumph. A triumph was basically you had incredible privileges for many generations. So it's kind of like being made Caesar. When you were crowned Caesar, then you would have this big parade, huge rules on exactly what's allowed at the parade and what the privileges are you get. But anyway, then the guy, Caesar, or the guy who's getting the triumph, the general, he would come parading in a chariot, and he would have a slave standing behind him. And the slave would whisper in his ear. The slave would be holding the laurels over his head and would be whispering in his ear, "Remember, thou art but a man. Remember, thou art but a man. Remember." And so all these tales that we have about playing God, Mary Shelley and all of this, Frankenstein stuff, we have that tape in our head. You shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing this. But it's like alcoholic. Alcoholics have a tape in their head saying, you shouldn't be driving, you should be going home, this should be your last drink. And they can't resist. And the public, we are clearly fossil fuel-aholics. We are energy economic growth-aholics. And so, we will go with a guy like David Keith, and that's basically shut down with extreme prejudice. You need shock value to shock people out of it. It really is the only way. You see, the more you get into the argument, the more you start talking against this and start applying rational arguments, the more he keeps up the snake-like monotone. and beguiles everybody. It's basically he's hypnotizing everybody. And the more you talk, the more you argue, the more you say how insane this is with rational arguments, the more you're actually normalizing it, the more you're habituating and getting the public used to this topic. So it's shocking at first, but that's going to wear off. And then it's going to seem more and more rational, because you have the psychopath talking for long periods, 20 years, getting on for 30 years. It all seems very, very logical. It all seems rational. It all seems safe because it's slow. You see, what he's saying is it's patiently done slowly, but slow doesn't work with the climate system. You can slowly do this, tickle the chain of the dragon. It doesn't matter. It will go into self-organized criticality and tip. And then it doesn't matter how slowly you approach it. Slow doesn't, you see, this again, he doesn't understand chaotic systems. Slow doesn't mean anything. It's basically, it's saying, well, I'm going to roll this snowball, down the hill very, very slowly. I say, no, it'll tip and cause an avalanche. When it causes an avalanche, you can't roll it back. So it would be, so a basic thing about doing this kind of experiment is saying you must not do anything that you cannot undo. So in other words, before you even start down this path, you must have an insurance policy that would be, be able to cover the damage of anything you do. If suddenly, there's one, say, hotspot, one dry place that becomes increasingly dry, is you must have an insurance policy that's able to cover that. Then, well, then there's a bit of rationality involved, but look what would happen. They would immediately say to you, like, oh, no, we couldn't do that. Such an insurance policy would cost trillions of dollars. Say, exactly. So if an insurance company will not indemnify you except for trillions of dollars, and you cannot afford that, then who's carrying the risk of this fucking experiment? You want us to carry the risk. You want to go ahead and do all these scientific experiments without indemnification. So you're saying, oh, this is our insurance policy. Well, what's the insurance policy against your experimentation? It's like, is somebody going to underwrite that? Nobody's going to underwrite that because it would cost trillions. Nobody would underwrite this damn madness. And that's the sanity of it. So the very first thing, so they'd say, oh, no, but therefore it means that we have to do it without insurance. Well, that's just saying that it's so crazy, somebody wouldn't insure it. But you going ahead recklessly, claiming that you're being wise. Come on, guys. It's just so fucked up.
Yeah, but that answers partly my question. But in my question, you see, the likes of David Keith and others like him, okay, even if something happened to one of them, let's say, I don't know, an accident or something, they fell off a boat or something, there'd be another cohort of other guys behind with all these geoengineering projects. I mean, he's not alone. There's a lot of people there, it's kind of bleak what you mean in terms of awareness of the public, because as you said, most of us are too dumb to grasp all the physics and all that's behind all this. So geoengineering is going to happen.
No, so what history shows is that these guys are all cowards. So they have all this momentum and all, public consensus, and they're all moving forward. But they are out for gain, right? So they're playing chess. So what historically is, if somebody actually stopped the game, with extreme prejudice, they only have to pop off one or two, and that put a whole chill over the whole thing. Nobody would do it anymore. See, there are a lot of instances in history where that kind of thing has been the case. Of course, they'd all shout to the roof that they weren't going to let it affect them, and you can't influence us that way and stuff. They'd all say that, but you'd find it would really, really go off the boil. The reason is that there's this ghost of the dead man kind of thing. So, in other words, I've seen this in, say, engineering projects. Is you get the, say, a guy pushing a line saying, you know, and engineering is competitive, and you have all these ambitious project managers and stuff, and all these different ideas on which direction, you know, technology should go in. And so you often in a company, you will see these, you know, guys get known for being the project A kind of guy. So then if you were David Keith, you'd be get a reputation as being known as the nutty solar radiation management guy. And then, you know, that would be your reputation. Now you'd gain momentum, and as time went on, people would be won over to your arguments and stuff. Then suddenly that guy gets, you know, chokes on a fishbone, right? What happens is that his ghost hangs around that whole subject. Then at the minute somebody, you know, the whole thing, your favorite project, say solar radiation management, is whenever anybody brings up the subject of solar radiation management, there's a little almost audible shiver runs down everybody's spine, and they can feel that the dead hand of, you know, it's kind of taboo to evoke the memory of Bob or whoever it was that pushed this technology. So although the technology, it basically takes it out of the rational and puts people into a fear mode, and kind of out of respect for the dead and fear, it becomes a kind of a taboo area and subject. So it doesn't matter how great the technology is and promising and stuff, the fact it's associated with, you know, a bad bone somebody is it means that every time this topic comes up, somebody changes the subject and goes in a different way, and it becomes like that in the social thing. It became, you know, it's a kind of a there be dragons there. So you see, okay, let me explain it this way. What the psychopath is doing is he's keeping it in the left brain, and he's spinning it up. He's spinning stories. He's perfecting a story so that, you know, when somebody comes and says, like, it's a chaotic system, you can't control a chaotic system, he goes away, finds an analogy from aircraft and how, you know, aeronautical engineers controlled chaos and stuff, and then misapplies it and comes back. And then somebody like me would come and say, like, dude, they did that over 2 billion trials. With the Earth system, you get one chance. Fuck it up once, chaotic cascades you never dreamed of. So he's saying, oh, no, but then he goes away and thinks about that. And he says, no, but we'll approach it very slowly and carefully. And then somebody will say, it doesn't matter. Self-organized criticality does not have anything to do with how slowly you dribble the grains of rice on the pile. It just has to do with where the pile tips. It has the internal dynamics. You do not have access to those parameters in the climate, and you never will, because you can't model something we've never seen, you dipshit. So then you see, but while all this is going on, it's all in the alien cortex. It's all being melted down, and what it's doing is ego fatigue. So the alien cortex has ego fatigue. The first shock of you know, when you tell sane people about geoengineering is like, you can't do that to my planet. They're shocked that somebody could be so hubristic and play God in this way. So it's an assault on their ego. Then he's wearing this ego down, like, you know, acidification of rocks. He's slowly eating away, the acid eating away at the arguments and stuff. Then people are getting ego fatigue. He's got a huge ego. He's monomaniacal, right? He's a megalomaniac. So he has decades of ego to come back. And he's a PhD from fucking Ivy League University. So he has an ego that's, you know, titanium. So he's going to wear the public down, like drip by drip by drip of this acid. He's Mr. Acid. I think that basically we should call him Mr. Acid, give him a name like that. And so he'll use this kind of acid to drip away at the dialogue and eat away at people's ego till they get ego fatigue. Then it would be almost like, you know, oh, fuck, go ahead, David, do your fucking experiments, you know, we give up. You know, he gets to that kind of stage eventually. Now, what you're doing, as he keeps spinning the plates and keeps running the story and does this Shahrazad's story of, on the alien cortex. Keep the dialogue going, he wants to say, because then his car, the Python, can keep the hypnotism going. He's like, let me keep mesmerizing more and more people, is what he's saying. So, you see, he has to keep everybody in the left brain. The minute somebody does something that shocks the, say, particularly reptilian brain, if somebody can put it in the realm of the amygdala, then it's he can't get it back into the realm of the alien cortex. So what propaganda the deed does is it shocks people. Then whenever they hear solar radiation management, they get a collection in their head to the amygdala, rather than So do you understand the difference? If you pass that kind of shock point, then when you raise this issue in a pub, say, then everybody goes, oh, stimulating, please change the subject, you're stimulating my my amygdala and reptilian brain, and it's taken away from the well, I think we might get to the point where we do solar radiation. I don't think David Keith is out bad. I think you've got prejudice against people that go to Harvard. I think he's quite brilliant. He sounds reasonable to me, and it's all like blah 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 in the alien cortex. But if you can completely shut down the argument and shut down the thing by making a dramatic act that puts it forever in the amygdala. So it's like, oh, we don't want to go there because we know what happened down that avenue. So that's why you need to park it there. It's really the only thing. If you think it through, you'll see you can't engage it. The more you engage, the more you're wrestling with this pig. And the longer you're wrestling with the pig, the pig gets what it wants to do, and that's habituate people to the whole idea.
Don't wrestle with pigs, you get dirty. I know. But actually, I was reading the comments on the video on YouTube, the one that you posted on David Keith, and there was quite an amount of people. There was not many comments. There was about 3,000 views, and there was about 60, 70 comments. And there's a lot of them that are calling him a criminal or insane, or so. There is some people who are interested in the subject because that's a kind of a specialized channel, but there was who can see through his talk and who are calling him a criminal. So yeah.
Yeah, but this is the early stage, right? So you can see there are a lot of upvotes and there are a lot of downvotes, kind of split 50-50, right? And the fact that he's pursuing this with that divided room means that it's, he's a psychopath. But DT said that one suspects that geoengineering will be applied by a country without reference to an individual scientist or engineer. There'll be global outrage. However, once the deed is done, it won't matter because it cannot be undone. Yeah, you see, once the genie's out of the bottle, you see, everybody's, they're missing. There's all these hidden assumptions and, grand, sweeping assumptions. So, for example, the assumption that David Keith mentioned was, I think the question put to him in that video was, can it be done by a rogue billionaire? In other words, his master, Bill Gates. And he said, well, it's unlikely because, if Bill Gates did it, I'll put it in straight English, in psychopathic circumlocution speech, but in straight English, this is what the conversation was about. So he's saying, could Bill Gates do this unilaterally? And saying no, because countries in Europe and stuff would put pressure on America to stop him. And so then he's saying it's more likely to be at a national level. In other words, he's saying it's more likely that India or somebody would start doing it. See, the thing is, if you see the where it might be done is if there's a shocking natural event, like say a wet bulb, temperature of over 53 degrees in say Pakistan or India, and a mass die-off, just people, you see what would happen in this, the grid goes down. The grid goes down, nobody has air conditioning. And then you get some very, very ugly pictures in the news. More than disaster porn, you get people just lying from heat exhaustion in the road. Now, that's enough shock value for there to be an extreme hysterical reaction of fear. And somebody like Modi would be pressured into saying, well, the science is there, do it. You'd have some guy like that, general, who's that general, the jiggering and the jaggering general, I can't remember what his name is. A guy like that is liable, could even come to power, saying like, we must stop the jiggering and the jaggering. We have all the science. Mr. David Keith has done it. David Keith would get on a plane and go and give them advice, and then General Hotshot there would take over from Modi if Modi didn't do it himself. So it'd be cornered into doing it as a response. Now, once India did it, the rest of the world would go jabba, 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 but, political correctness, racism, blah, 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 and then they couldn't say anything. And then the genie would be out of the bottle. Then India would say, it's worked better, look what happened to monsoons coming back. China might be in on it because, they'd say, like, thanks for restoring the monsoon. And so they could come back with good reports. Then there'd be tremendous pressure on the rest of the world to start doing it, so that instead of the local temperatures, the global temperatures were brought down. And economists would be clamoring for it. So we can move into a very, very dangerous area. This is the kind of summoning of the demon that you just don't want to do. We don't want to get into this area because it's a quagmire. And so it's just, you see, to hold on to your sanity, you just have to say, do we want to be able to control the climate? And say, no. It's one of those things you don't want ability. You don't want ultimate control. It's like, who wants that responsibility, right? You have to get up in the morning and say, are we going to go and spread sulfates? Come war, famine. Oh man, it's so crazy. Imagine, the trigger points that you could be messing with here are extreme. So if you failed, you would be in for the long haul. So David Keith thinks you can do it. We can all sensibly lower carbon. It'll give us time. Not thinking the obvious, which is actually the moral hazard of giving us no reason to remove carbon out of the atmosphere, which he kind of accepts but doesn't know what to do with. And then, other than say, but then and they can tail it off. It's like, how do you know? How do you know you can tail it off? He's saying it'll give us time to adapt, and then we can we can kick our drinking. So like, how do you know you'll ever get there? And then what happens when this atmosphere is at 500 parts per million, and then you're assuming that, making all these wild assumptions that the Earth system hasn't got all these black swans in it already. What happens if you get a meteor like Tunguska? What happens if the volcanoes suddenly go off? What happens if you get a meteor like Tunguska and it's basically puts a big freeze on us? Then you're going to have to try and like crank up the CO2 because remember, you're in control now. So you've got to like respond to this event, which the Earth would stabilize after a while. You are in charge now. So you have to go and, change the temperature dial. What happens in the meantime? That time, you don't know what the hell you're doing. That Tunguska type thing, if it landed in the mid-Atlantic or something, all the CO2 is being absorbed by the sea. We forget that. We think it's all being absorbed by the atmosphere. No, it's being absorbed by the sea. It's basically a big bottle of Coca-Cola. And if a meteorite hit it and warmed it up, it would do exactly what would happen if you chuck a tennis ball at a soda pop. It would erupt with CO2. And that's what the ocean will do. And then what? You've got the thermostat, you're going to be chasing this demon. It's like, you just don't want to go here, man. How stupid can you be? Well, we can be very, very stupid in the pursuit of control and driven by fear. Yeah, we'll get here in a heartbeat. That's why action should be taken to make sure that this area becomes no-go to the point of a bullet.
Yeah, well, I know what I would do if a guy like David Keith would come and trick or treat. I know the sort of sweet I would give him. But yeah, is there a lot like him? I mean,
no, you see, that's the thing, is it's also a fringe. You see, you got to like nip it in the bud. There are only 20 of these nutcases like Ken Caldera. The thing that people are missing now, and is worth highlighting over and over again, is this is military technology. This is military technology. It's not civilian. They're all presenting it like it's civilian. It's not. It's made for warfare. So somewhere buried in this is this idea that it's always going to be peaceful, the economy is going to be fine, we're not going to be at war. And it's like, no, the first time we go to war, it's like civilians will not have, it'll be treasonous to say anything against the government's climate program that is designed to defeat the enemy and increase production, crop production at home. It would become treasonable. You could be shot for revealing secrets about it, or for actually doing it. So, or actually speaking out against it. You could go to prison or be shot if we were at war. And this is military technology. So don't forget, this is military technology. They're just faking you out. These guys like Ken Caldera, they worked for the military. All of this stuff has been developed for the military. And it's not something like, oh, hypothetical Star Wars kind of stuff. They used it. They used it in Vietnam. This was a key policy in Vietnam, was climate destabilization as a weapon. It's always been a weapon. So they're saying, should we get this military weapon technology and apply it in peacetime so we can grow crops and keep the economy going? That's what's really on the table. But they hide that aspect. They hide their backgrounds. They hide the fact that they're fucking psychopaths. Yeah, this is a dual use thing, and yeah, I mean, the scientists are always so naive. They always think that because they have consensus and they all Boy Scouts and they go to conferences where they all, agree with one another, they think the world works like that. So the world doesn't work like that. The world is riven with opposition and competing interests, and nobody's going to work together to, vote on where to set this global thermostat. There are terrible consequences for some countries. I mean, just do an experiment. Get an office room with 50 people in it and get them to, put an office thermostat in, crank it up to, say, 35 degrees, and then see what happens. I'll tell you what happens. Freaking argument breaks out in the office about where the thermostat should be set. You think countries, if you can't do that in an office, you're going to do this on a global scale with nuclear-armed countries? It's basically, you're giving people a recipe for a nuclear brawl. It's just unbelievable. The United Nations is not going to be owning this thermostat. It's going to be owned by a billionaire, in effect, through the channels of some country or something. The countries are not autonomous. They're not sovereign anymore. The billionaires own the countries. A billionaire owns the country you live in. Get used to it.
I was looking.
Yeah, speaking as an engineer.
I was looking at.
Speaking as an engineer. Yeah, speaking as an engineer, we're trained to treat every problem as solvable, whether true or not. Yeah, it's kind of like being a doctor, like Sophie's. Like, doctors get into this is because you take on the role and persona of a doctor. Patients come to you expecting you to fix them, whether you can or not, and then the doctors just do some flub. because they don't want to disappoint people and say, yeah, well, doctors can't really do anything about this, sorry. So that they pretend. They go through this big rigmarole of pretending that they can fix stuff they can't, because they don't want to give up their status. And it's the same as engineers will do anything. They've been in this mindset, this Cold War mindset, that they said, like, we can go to the moon and do the other things and stuff. And it's like anything is possible if you set your mind to it, is what they teach these kids at school, and say, no, it isn't. So like, touch your nose with your elbow and without breaking your arm. There's something that's impossible that even an engineer can't do. So shut the fuck up. It's like almost everything is impossible. Almost everything you can think of. The reason why we think that engineers can solve every problem is because we frame the problem so narrowly. But almost everything you can think of cannot be solved by engineering. It's a very vanishingly small and limited, smallly defined problem. And that's, just talking about the Earth's climate system is hubris in itself, because there is no such thing. The Earth doesn't have a category called my climate system. It's like it's all interconnected with everything. Everything is interconnected. So, the butterfly effect in one tiny little area has an effect on the price of oranges on the other side of the world. So you cannot think in terms of, well, we'll be doing solar radiation management here, and it's for the climate. And this is the climate department. You think, like, well, what about the health department? What about the guys that who make the solar panels that now find that they're 5% less efficient, and then suddenly they're not competitive with oil anymore, and everybody starts moving back to oil, and it's like, these things are not contained in a little box called the climate. We're just modifying the climate. It's going to stay in this little box called the climate. It's like, there's no such box. That box is in your head, and your head should be in a box. So, the other day someone told me that even if all organisms die, billions of humans will be living happily. Yeah. You see this. It's the Sorcerer's Apprentice. You see, what it's likely to do is, if you start acidifying the oceans, the problem is CO2 itself is carbonic acid. So it's an acid. And then David Keith was also talking about, well, you can put bases in the ocean. But you look what you're doing. It doesn't work that way. How do you stir the ocean? You put acids here, you put bases here. It's like it doesn't work that way. You would kill off, say, the cyanobacteria with the acids, because they're right at the limit of where they leach out the calcium, so the vertebrates cannot form. So there are lots of diatoms and krill and all these things which we never think about because they don't have commercial value. And so the krill are eaten by whales. Whale poop is very, very important for regulating the iron content in the ocean. So you get the iron content, you'll get algal blooms that could kill off vast arrays of microbes. So indirectly through whale poop, you're fucking with the oxygen levels. And here's David Keith saying, no, we're monitoring the 42 parameters. Like, Jesus wept. Just somebody, please do it. Just do it. Just put him out of his agony. Keith dropped the bass. Yeah, it's like, it's all about a bass. No trouble. Yeah, but do you see how you would run into limits? It's like say you did all this, and then what would you see? They think it's all contained in this response feedback thing, and so but what's likely to happen is slowly you would get a drip feed of scientific papers saying it looks like, we're not sure, but it looks like there's some little disaster, and it's hard to see how it's related, but we think it is closely coupled with this sulfate bath. Then, these guys would poo-poo it. You'd go through these cycles where it would be first laughed off, then people would take it more seriously, then people would fight it, and you'd go, and eventually it would become real science. But when it's well down, down the road from that point of view, and then it might be, okay, well, we're in the business of managing total management of everything. So now we finally accept the science. Now we find out, oh, the remedy for this is to put some bases in the ocean. So then we got to, so then we've got to go and find, what do you put in the ocean that works as a good base and will circulate all around quickly enough to do this 10-year, to mitigate this 10-year accident that you've just done? It would be, you could really find out, like, oh, well, that would take, say, all the lime in that the world produces. Oh dear, we just reached a limit we didn't know. So then you'd say, okay, we could do all the lime in the world, but we wouldn't be able to make concrete anymore, or we wouldn't be able to make, CO2-free concrete, stuff like that. It's like these guys need to go and learn systems theory and learn about complexity, and then if they understood even a slight bit, if David Keith even understood, the first semester worth of complexity theory, he would stop this, unless he was a complete psychopath, which unfortunately I diagnose him as one. The climate is just a highly distributed system with embedded stochastic processes. How hard could it be? Exactly. And the thing is, we don't know what those processes are. We don't know how many dimensions there are, but I can tell you, they're infinite. They're infinite. They go, that's what the chaos theorists and Lorenz said with that paper. So if you see that Sabine Hossenfelder thing that I posted about chaos, there was a thing about the butterfly effect, and what Lorenz said in that paper was, if you do a grid of the climate, and so basically say, well, we up to now, okay, for example, like these models that say David Keith works, those grids are up to 1 kilometer. So they don't, they only see clouds that are bigger than 1 kilometer, which already there is a bit of a fuck up. So but what Lorenz is saying is, if you double the amount of parameters, in other words, you then have a grid that's now has 4 little squares where you used to have 1, is saying that your uncertainty is only going up. Your certainty is only going up by the square. So you eventually, it's a simple formula, you top out. So if you had 5 days predictability with a certain grid granularity, say kilometer, then if you doubled that and say it was half a kilometer, then you're only going up to about 7. And then you double it again, you're only going up to about 10 days predictability. But you're getting to a point of diminishing returns. Now, that's a very dangerous horizon, because the parameter that you're fucking with, which is the albedo of the Earth, it might be on a completely different scale. It might be on a 30-day scale or a yearly scale or something like that. So your instrument would be too gross to see it. And so then you'd say, well, okay, we'll use lots of instruments, or, have a yearly scale. We'll monitor all year, stuff like that. And you say, no, you won't, because it's stochastic. How will you know that you're not looking at a statistical club? So then they say, well, we would put sulfates up in the air very strategically. We would make a pattern. So I saw one guy, I saw that these lunatics did a paper saying, again, proving that they don't understand stochastic processes, that they said, well, we'll do it, like intermittently. So we'll do it like a digital signal. So we'll seed the atmosphere with a digital signal, and then we'll be able to tease out our impact, because, we can actually see the digital signature as opposed to all the noisy signature, which is the temperature, the usual temperature of the Earth. And say, like, no. You've just made a very basic mistake about complexity theory, is that it's scale free. So what he's just said is, if we put a digital scale, then we can actually, we can tease out by making discrete inputs of sulfuric acid in the upper atmosphere, then we can actually read that signal and make sure that the concentrations that we are looking at, or the temperature change that we are looking at, comes from us and not from some other noisy signal. Say, no, you fundamentally can't. That's an axiom of randomness. So these guys don't understand a random process or pseudo-random process, or the Earth process, which is stochastic, semi-stable process. But if for example, they're also basic assumptions. So then you can get cleverer still. You can be like, Shannon in the signal to noise thing that I was talking about in the Darwin video. You could say, well, we'll be super careful to make sure that our cloud seeding, or not our cloud seeding, but our atmospheric seeding was done at a signal that could be distinguished from the background. In other words, you would use a Morse code signal like David Keith is a complete psychopath. You would do that in Morse code and say the days of the week or something like that, so that then you could read back your signal and be very, very sure that the signal coming back, it's very unlikely that the climate system would just by chance manage to have fluctuations that would read out for the Morse code for the truth about David Keith, right? So then you could say, we're very, very sure that signal is ours. And say, like, but you're sure in a box. It's like, how do you know that, for example, this doesn't become military strategic? Maybe Putin's up there, he knows exactly what your signal is, and he wants, the thermostat dialed up or down in his direction. So he's fooling you. He's basically putting a corresponding signal to fool you. Maybe this is all, military games or something like that. It's like, why? How do you make these assumptions that everything will go your way and will all work like this? It's like crazy shit. And then the next thing you do is, the next thing we got to deal with is, once you start down this path, it'll be, the geoengineering gap. Okay, here's a Cassandra prediction from me, is very soon you'll get the geoengineering gap. And one of these Dr. Strangeloves will say, Putin is going ahead with geoengineering. Xi is going ahead. Puba is going ahead with it. We must catch up. We have a geoengineering gap. People in America, we've been too concerned about playing God and stuff. And in the meantime, Putin and Xi have stolen a march on us. We must catch up with geoengineering. We're moments away from that kind of stupidity. So, must act fast to shut down. But Kurzweil says we will reach the AI thinking about 2041. Kurzweil, surely AI will save us from. Yeah, okay. So here's the thing: is if you put AI on this problem, so surely somebody, Kurzweil or somebody, will say, yeah. Kurzweil's already said that we'll reach the technological singularity by 2040. And so he's saying that AI will be able to sort out climate change and global poverty and all this, because we'll have super intelligence and kind of like a phase change and here's how would you know if you have a machine that says oh yeah you go ahead stuff the atmosphere full of sulfates, you'll be fine. It's like put it dim the solar radiation by 15%. Go on, you'll be fine. How would you know to believe it? There's only one way, and you're going to have to go and try it. And then the thing's going to go, ha, 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 stupid humans. They believed me. Now I own the earth. It's how do you know that's enough? It's so damn stupid what these guys are doing.
Can I ask you a question there? There was a while ago, about a month ago, you posted, or somebody posted on the sub, a video about this American guy. I can't remember his name just now because I'm Dane something. Anyway, he's a guy who has got a website on geoengineering, and he's claiming that it's happening already. And I'm not talking about the military uses that happened during Vietnam War and other Chinese experiments over Tibet and other places where I think there has been some form of weather modifying techniques applied. But what's your position on this? Is already happening, big scale. We're in this climate engineering already and all that, because I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable on that website. I went to see it and seen a lot of libertarian kind of shit on it too, and I'm kind of, yeah, wondering about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of ignorance about it. So the first problem is the geoengineering is being done on a massive scale, but the various types. And so this particular one is solar radiation management. So it's these severely interventionist ones. The leading ones are, I mean, planting trees is geoengineering. Just the programs they've got in the high Arctic for eco restoration are really geoengineering. And some idiot will come, it's only a matter of time if the subject comes up on Reddit before some stupid ass comes and says, oh, but we're already doing the planet with our CO2 emissions and stuff like that. And you say, like, yeah, and how's that working out, moron? So it's like there's this thing like, well, humans are already changing the planet, so therefore it's just more of the same is not a good argument. So it's this these particular ones. So yeah, this jet fuel. So jet A1 and jet A1 the whole world runs on, apart from America, who has jet A. Jet A is a dirty fuel, has a lot of sulfur in it. So planes already are putting sulfur up in the upper atmosphere. So it is correct that planes and the contrails from vapor trails, not chemtrails, right? Chemtrails are not a thing, but it's almost like a psyops, because I think that guy's just a lone nut, but it is the kind of thing they do in a psyop, because they make some ridiculous claim that is easily shot down, and then they put that out to cloud the issue. So then it's very likely the obvious way to do sulfates is from aircraft, and then you could just put something in the fuel potentially, and do in essence chemtrails. Now nobody would argue, because you've already established that that's a ridiculous, wild, not tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist thing. And so the mere fact that you've established that and got all the liberals and the mainstream to poo-poo it on site means that it now opens the way for you to try it. So yeah, are they doing it? Yeah, they're doing. China's putting sulfide in the. I mean, what do you call it? Sulfur. Oh, I can't remember. Yeah, but they're doing it from the ground. They're basically doing. So there's weather making, which is kind of different. If you do enough weather making, but China does it routinely. They do it for the Olympic Games. They do cloud seeding and stuff like that. So if you do enough weather modification, it becomes climate modification. But the things is the marine cloud brightening and all of these things. So, but direct carbon capture is also climate engineering. And then you say, oh well, that's okay, direct air capture. And you say, well, no, it depends on how you drive it, and what's the energy source of your carbon capture is very, very important. And again, it's very important that you don't bound it into a box where you're using coal to run your air extraction technology, which is very likely. So for a sci-fi movie on the 1% retreating to low Earth orbit, The Elysium, starring Matt Damon, Hollywood for telling the future. Yeah, the Bezos on that is they're thinking in terms of, a rich man's escape strategy is, instead of like taking a boat and going to sea, which is a poor man's escape strategy, is you take a spaceship and go into space. But space is not a friendly environment, right? You've got to be in low Earth orbit, and extremely expensive to get up there, and then you've got to you wouldn't be able to sustain it for very long, right? The clock's ticking on you the moment you have a space station. It's like what the ISS shows and what the Biosphere 2 shows is that you can't really recreate the Earth on small scale like that. The systems, there are too many systems. Like Drek Paprika on one of the videos said that the reason, he commented that one of the reasons why the Biosphere 2 experiment failed was because of phosphor. They couldn't get the phosphor cycle to work. I thought it was the CO2, but maybe that was a secondary one. The thing that drove them out of that bathysphere was the CO2 accumulation, so they had to put a scrubber. But if you have a scrubber up in space, it's you got to have a look at Apollo 13. You've got your large scale Apollo 13 up there, and it's the ISS is a failure. Well, it's a success if you take it from the point of view as it proves that space colonies are not possible. But the ISS roundly says that it's like campaign, and it's a lot of systemic inertia that we even have the ISS still going. But the ISS is living proof that space stations don't exist in isolation up there. It needs tremendous amounts of care and feeding. Yeah, and we mine the asteroids. Yeah, of course we do. I mean, that's like mining a shooting bullet. So we go up there and mine a shooting bullet. It's like, whoa, it's crazy. You know how expensive that would be, and it's like, but anyway, it's part of our insanity. So yeah, it's basically adolescent science fiction, and again, it's how we are failing to grow up. So this idea of Musk is that we have an insurance policy. We become a multi-planet species. We make sure we hedge our bets on human. Some people living on Mars and stuff. It's all an adolescent fantasy. And but it's indulged in our adolescent culture. It's basically accepted and celebrated to the point that people throw money, $300 billion, in the direction of this technocide. It's a bizarre place to get to. Anyway, well, I guess we've been going quite a long time, but maybe we should round it off there. Unless any other questions or things people want to say? Yeah, Hollywood has done us a tremendous disservice.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this expose. Thank you.
Yeah, it's pity nobody gets to hear all of this. Maybe we should, I don't know, I think like write a book or something like Bright Green Lies or something like that. But
or maybe Hollywood should make a movie about the geoengineering project gone completely crazy.
Oh yeah, there is. There's these what's it? It's there's a recent one about driving the planet cold. It's called something about like snow plowing or something. I can't remember, something like that. No, Hollywood is making these movies. There's the day after. I think it's one, but after something like that.
Yeah,
they're making them all the time, but it's the same problem as the conspiracy theorists, is because scientists can easily shoot them down for junk science. So then they miss the point. So in dramatizing it, they get the science wrong, and then they lose the point they lose their credibility. And in essence, it's people go, oh yeah, but that was Hollywood. So no, yeah, that was Hollywood, but you missed the subtlety of what could actually happen. Mm-hmm. So it's a way of clouding the issue. It's the tobacco industry's gamble. In other words, yeah, just cloud everything, and then carry on. So it's basically throw sand in their eyes and keep moving forward.
Yeah, but nevertheless, I think it's worth revisiting the subject of geoengineering often, and this is not the only talk we should have on it, and we should keep going. And And I hope that there'll be some conversations about it during COP and comments and stuff to XR, even though we're banned from there. So, but we can still.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's very related to AI. It's so all of these things are kind of interrelated. They all come down to the alien cortex, but it's very surprisingly interrelated to AI and to the understanding of order and chaos. And so what David Keith is trying to do is to impose order on chaos. And that's problematic in itself. It's like, you know, what temperature do you pursue? Do you pursue a flat temperature, or do you try and mimic the chaotic temperature regime that we have now? See, if you're in control of the weather, you might choose to say, well, we wanted a garden variety temperature. We might want to like dampen out the seasons. We might want to dampen out summer and winter. You know, we might want to dampen out the daily seasons. Or, you know, how much variation do you allow? I bet you they'd probably want it smooth, and then that might destabilize it on their own. Trying to pursue order out of a chaotic system becomes its own demon. So I'm just pointing this out because it's highly related to maybe the next thing we should do is what exactly is a random number, and what exactly is stupidity and intelligence in AI, because it is related. Have you read that Bill Gates has already bought the narrative? No. Are there any links? I've been waiting for this to happen. I've been trolling around trying to see, but I've seen various people out of this psychopathic camp saying that, you know, this is a big chance we can, you know, hijack it. It's not on the agenda, but we can hijack COP26 for geoengineering. And then I haven't seen anything really definitive. So, but I'm waiting for this to become an outcome of COP26. Is like, see, got to do geoengineering. Yeah, but please post anything you can on XRMed about Bill Gates and COP26, David Keith, Ken Caldera, and these mad bastards. Okay, well, so you mind we just pause before we just go and just kind of let all this shit go and go out and enjoy the day, and just do that by falling still. Boom. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And enjoy Halloween.
Yeah, you too.
Yep, all the best.